Folks, welcome inside the Parisi Palace, high above 3733 East Broadway. This is a live edition of the Jake Feinberg Show. Come be on Power Talk. Please go to our website, powertalk.live. Download our free app and stream all of our live local programming, including Solomon on Blast, the Jim Parisi Show, and yours truly, the Jake Feinberg Show. We can't thank you enough for making this part of your day today, and it's really a high honor as we round out the year 2017 to be able to connect with a rhythmatist who I've been tracking for some time. I had an opportunity to catch a hang with Denny Sywall the other day, and I said, "Do you know this? Do you know where this cat's? Where his whereabouts?" And Denny's like, "Yeah, of course. Let me get a hold of him for you." And sure enough, I got his contact, and here he is, Tom Radtke. Welcome to the Jake Feinberg Show.
Hey, Jake, how are you?
Good to hear you, my man. It's
good to hear you.
Yeah, I woke up this morning and I was transcribing this interview I just did with in Toluca Lake with Emil Richards, the percussionist, and he was talking.
Sure.
He was talking about Harry Partch, and Harry created the 43-tone octave, and I realized though that in my studies about you that there was a cat that was a mentor to you possibly, and I wanted you to talk about the significance of a guy who has been on my radar for some time, is Dick Schory. I was wondering how you connected with him, and also how he expanded sonically, how he expanded music.
Well, I met Dick. I believe he was working at Ludwig Drums. He was one of their artist reps. Guys who dealt with artists, percussionists, and he also was an arranger and an advocate of percussion ensemble stuff, and he developed this large percussion ensemble which he recorded a couple times. In fact, I recorded with him in Carnegie Hall of all places.
Yeah, I have that album.
Yeah.
That's unbelievable.
Yeah, that was a lot of fun. It was a short tour that culminated in finishing up at Carnegie Hall, and it was interesting. When you called me the other day, and we were talking a bit about Ronnie Steele. Ronnie's beginnings, other than him being a standing guitarist and studio guy, he was a recording engineer too. In fact, he recorded. He worked in Nashville. He was with RCA down there, one of their famous studios, and he was doing double duty that night in Carnegie Hall. He was playing in the ensemble and then running between changing reels. He had a 24-track machine that was recording everything.
Wait, he was.
So
hold on. I just want to be clear. Steele was recording the Schory concert.
Yeah, the recording that you hear, it was recorded. He had a 24-track off to the side, and those 24-track 2-inch tape would last, I think it was 30 minutes. I'm not exactly sure, maybe 20 minutes. So, this thing would run out, and it would flop, 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 and he'd run over there, and he'd change reels, and he'd put it out again. And he recorded the entire concert, and it was interesting stuff. I think Joe Morello, wasn't Morello a guest on that?
Dude, I'm about ready to throw in. I'm about ready to throw in this track right now. Dick Schory. Well, there's Dick Schory Percussive Pops Orchestra from '63. How many of these albums were you actually on?
I recorded the live one. I think I remember doing the studio one at RCA. Chicago RCA had an enormous studio for quite a few years, and we were in that room because it was a large group. I think it was a bunch of maybe 30 players. I'm not sure exactly how. I can't remember the whole, because they were augmented with horns and all sorts of stuff like that. And then I did an overdub. I did an overdub of a project of his where I was all alone, and I was recording against a lot of the other stuff that had been pre-recorded. So I think I probably did 3 records with him. I guess, I'm not sure exactly how that ended up together, but
and then ironically, I just found this this record yesterday, and I wanted to ask you about these cats. This came out of this was recorded on RCA. It was the most fabulous sound experience ever. The first percussion sextet, and the director was C. Warren Hard. The cats were Bob Swan, Earl Zindars, Bruce Spencer, Chuck Spees, Ralph Roberts, and Doug Allen. Any of those cats? Did you ever cross paths with those cats?
One name was familiar to me there, but I'm not.
Was it,
I think
Chuck Spees? Was it Chuck Spees?
No, there was a couple more down.
Was it Doug Allen, Ralph Roberts, Bruce Spencer, Earl Zindars, or Bob Swan?
Earl Zindars.
Who was Earl Zindars? Now, see, I mean, what I'm trying to get at is this. Like, we are living in this age of mechanization and machine parts, and here it is. You're coming up, and records are being pressed with a percussion sextet. I mean, that's insane. I mean, it's just insane. You know, and I'm just what I'm getting at is, in your mind, because Harry Parch built all his own instruments, and he did all this incredible. Like, I mean, Emil was saying, he goes, after these rehearsals, I'd be driving home, and cars or every sound sounded like music. And I just wonder if that's what it was like with you and Schory to a degree.
Well, Schory was you know, he utilized arrangers. I know Les Hooper did quite a few arrangements for him, you know, and Les was a great arranger and composer and writer, and so, you know, it was sort of imagining playing with a big band, but everything is a percussion instrument. You know, it's a kind of bizarre sound. And although I think he did have, like the Carnegie Hall thing, there were horns, there were trumpets, there were brass, and augmented the size of the percussion ensemble itself. But you know, everything was a percussion instrument, and you know, you sort of reimagined what it felt like to play with a big band, but as xylophones and marimbas.
How do you think it affected consciousness expansion? I mean, with the audience as well. I mean, to me, this was like, it was such a huge part of pop music at that time.
Yeah, I you know, I don't know how to answer that. I mean, it's people seem to really enjoy it. You know, wherever we went with that ensemble, especially that tour culminating in New York. It was, the place was packed, you know, and you know, Dick was is, I mean, he's still with us. I think. I mean, I talked to him a few years ago. I haven't talked to him lately, but
wow, I did not even know he was still with us. That's phenomenal.
Yeah. We crossed paths, unfortunately, at a memorial service for a musician, a friend, and that we were both friends with, and we talked after that for quite a while, and he was still pretty active. I don't know, he was trying to still put something together for some kind of tour. I'm not exactly what he was doing. In fact, I put him in touch with Les Hooper again, because he was trying to find Les in L.A., and Les has been living in California for many years, and I don't know what happened with that, you know, where Dick was going with that, or if something didn't happen, or who knows? It could still be happening. I don't know.
Well, I mean, just in general. I mean, did you, like, I guess what were some of the did you have to seek out the music that you wanted to seek out in Chicago? Did you hear it on the radio, or did you actually go into the ghetto to see it yourself?
You mean now you're talking about jazz music, or just,
I'm talking about, like, you know, like I know, like cats like Barry Goldberg and Michael Bloomfield, like they heard the blues on the radio, and then they wound up going to the South Side of Chicago to find it. Paul Butterfield was already in the South Side of Chicago, so he was like already in the culture. Assuming you were born in Chicago or in and around there, did you have to go seek out that music? I guess jazz and blues was really up alongside each other at that time.
Well, I did. You know, especially because in those days, you know, if you wanted to go hear the music you were listening to on your records, and there was somebody playing in a club. I wasn't old enough to get into half of those places, so I had to sneak in. And I remember going, kind of worming my way into the Sutherland Lounge in south side of Chicago to see Miles a couple times. And
oh boy,
it was thrilling. I related this story to my father, who passed away a few years ago at a ripe old age of 96 years old. But when I was a kid, a friend of mine and I, we both after we went to bed, we both snuck into our suits. I climbed out a bedroom window on the second floor. He met me downstairs. We took the keys to our family car. I was probably 14, maybe 15 at that time, and we opened the garage door, pushed the car out down to the street, and then started it and drove downtown to see Duke Ellington's band at the Blue Note. and
that is unbelievable.
A guy let us in. I believe, he must have been sort of amused by us, at this point, because we're trying to act old in suits and everything like this. And we wanted to go see Duke Ellington's band. So we went there. We saw a set. Then we got back in the car and drove back up to, at that point, Morton Grove, Illinois, which was a suburb, north of Evanston. So, it was up the Lakeshore Drive. And, it's only amazing that we were not busted for this ridiculous stunt, And on top of it, I was always short. So I'm sitting on a rug, this folded rug to drive the car, pretty bizarre. But it was fun to to see such an incredible organization, and I remember this one moment that Duke kind of came up on the stand, and the band's kind of milling around, and there's a couple guys up in the stand, a couple guys in the bar, and he starts to tinkle a little bit, and he starts playing a blues, and the bass player and I'm trying to think who was playing drums with him in that time.
Was it Joe Jones or?
No, Sonny. I was thinking Sonny Payne, but Sonny was with bassist drummer.
Right.
I can't think of who was. He was a great player too. In fact, he's the.
Was it Harold Jones or someone?
No, not Harold. We were kind of contemporaries.
Yeah, I know. No, this is fantastic.
Anyway, Duke's starting to play this blues thing. And he's looking around, and guys are starting to mill up onto the bandstand, kind of little by little, and finally they're all assembled, and all of a sudden, out of nowhere, this chord comes out of the brass section, and it just blew your head back. It was so incredible, and it was like the band had such a loose feel, and it was so much fun to see that kind of creativity, especially in a large ensemble,
Can you talk about how intoxicating it was? To me, I don't see a lot of live music today. When I do go, I just feel like when I go see jazz, I hate labels, but when I go see that melodic improvisation, it's become so classicalized. It's become so predictable. It's become so formulaic. And can you talk about how the blues, how those cats like Duke and Basie, even Louis Armstrong, and how much blues inflection there was in jazz music at that time?
Well, I'm sitting from the drum chair, so the guys may say, you haven't got really the melodic sense that we do as horn players and stuff like that. But the blues is, it's kind of the building block of jazz. It's that formula became the stepping stone that took all the other, classic tunes and standards and things like that and made those jazz tunes, and certainly, the geniuses of that era, so Miles and just.
Well, Sonny Rollins, Coltrane, Charlie Neville, who I interviewed this year, Tootie Heath. Before they were playing bebop, they were playing R&B.
Yeah.
They were playing on R&B bands. Yeah,
I would believe it. I came from. I was a kid from the suburbs. Really. My jazz education came as I started playing more and more on the street, and you learn by doing as you do. I didn't come from that element of playing in the R&B bands till later. You know, it's funny. You know, as I started doing more and more studio work, I was called upon more and more to be flexible, and play a lot of different kinds of music. You know,
Absolutely.
and it was my jazz ears that allowed me to do that. You know, because I could sort of, you know, take in what I was supposed to be emulating and then kind of make it my own a bit and then bring it back out. And I suppose that's just a function of all of us as players. And the studio work, you know, was fun. It kind of demanded that all of a sudden I start to sound authentic, you know, when really my roots were not really authentic at all, you know. But you know, it made it a great opportunity, and I guess in a way it was sort of like I kind of reversed, you know. It came sort of moved to the R&B kind of world and backbeat world and rock and roll world and things like that, kind of through jazz, you know. And it was, and probably there were many drummers of my era, my day, you know, some of the great players from LA and New York and stuff like that. They had a lot of the same experiences, I think. You know, a drummer that I always loved out of the 70s and 80s was Jim Gordon. And
Sure.
I know Jim came from jazz playing. You know, he had, I think he and I had some very similar upbringings, you know, just as young players and things like that. And I would think that was true of many guys. Like, although maybe a little later you're talking Steve Gadd, I mean, who was always a wonderful, great player, improvisational player, you know, but you know, he certainly came from the jazz world.
I mean, Hal Blaine was a jazzer, Keltner was a jazzer, Densmore loved. I mean,
Yeah.
You know, all those cats. Some of them, like Densmore, idolized the guys and would go back and try to pretend to play like them. And then cats like Keltner, who were literally playing at the Both And Club in San Francisco with Bobby Hutcherson. Hal Blaine did the same thing, you know, even earlier. Earl Palmer was getting into the studios in L.A., and they'd be like, yeah, play something with a rock feel to it. There was no word for rock and roll. It was just like, play it with, it was all feel. And you talked about jazz. Yeah. You talk about jazz ears. What does that mean exactly? Does that mean like knowing how to play any tune? I know you're not a melodic, I mean, you're a drummer, but a lot of the cats talked about they learned how to play every tune in every key, and it opened their vernacular. And I'm just wondering, when you talk about jazz ears, when did your ears get stretched out the most on the bandstand early on?
Well, almost always. Yeah. every time you played, especially if you were playing with cats that you know were some notches above you, you know, as far as being on top of things and players and stuff like that. You know, you were just immediately demanded into being at the top of your game and listening, opening up your ears as far as you could, and at the same time try to keep a sort of a creative center, you know, coming out of you, and you know, applying it to what you're hearing, and then playing it back, you know, giving it back in that sense of the conversation of jazz, you know, and so I think almost every time you're playing, you're in a learning situation, and which makes it so satisfying, you know, because it really, you feel like when you finish a tune or even finish a set, you know, that this stuff has been accomplished. You know, I don't play as much as I used to, obviously, you know, older up years and stuff, but I play this one gig every year that I just actually did a couple weeks ago. It's a gig at the Green Mill in Chicago, and it's called Guitar Madness, and it's 6 guitars, bass, and drums. I know that sounds like a recipe for the world's biggest train wreck, but this is the most remarkable group of guys. And we do it every year. In fact, we just did our 17th year. We do it for Toys for Tots. We do a benefit night, you know. And Dave Gemolo, the wonderful owner of the Green Mill, opens up the place, and they have Marines collecting toys at the door and stuff. And the place is always packed out. And you know, it's just a remarkable evening of improvisation in, you know, 6 different ways of looking at a guitar come at you every tune, and it's so much fun to play because I'm all of a sudden I'm forced right back into that moment of trying to listen and being as open as possible, and at the same time, wanting to contribute, obviously, and to bring something to the party, So it's a great experience, and it once again, it just keeps you young in a lot of ways, and it keeps your ears open,
Can you talk a little bit about the idea of when, like if you played in these situations, you go to places today and they have, incredible sound systems and, but for a long time, you guys were just playing and the stuff would come out of the PA and
right.
there might be
yeah.
there might be like one or two mics,
my piano mic,
Yeah, I mean, the point is that, can you talk about a seminal moment for you as it relates to dynamics? You go see younger peeps, my generation, Gen Xers and younger cats. They start at 10 sometimes, and they never change. It just stays right there. And the greatest thing about the Parches and the Schorys and the the list goes on and on and on. Even Buddy Rich and those cats. I mean, they could bring it down or back up. The dynamics were infectious. How did you learn dynamics on the bandstand?
Well, once again, in fact, it's just as relating to the story about playing the Guitar Madness gig. That's a gig where it's real easy to go from 0 to 9 real fast because you got all these amps on the stage and everything is electrically being powered except for the drums. Everything else, even the bass player who's playing an acoustic bass is still using a bass amp and a speaker. So when that all of a sudden the moment comes into playing where one of the soloists wants to bring it way down, he physically really has to almost turn and look and kind of indicate he wants to come down because you're sort of at this one point where you just it's hard, it's not as though it's like it's not as though it's like an acoustic saxophone or trumpet or we're coming to the piano courses and we're going to cool out now because we're dealing with a quieter instrument and it is a kind of a moment where you have to wake yourself up a little bit and say, wait a minute, we got to play dynamic here because electric instruments kind of, like I said, they kind of start out loud and they stay that way, and when you were saying, the generation that kind of starts at 10, it's kind of built into the instrument, where more acoustic jazz days, especially when you didn't have sophisticated sound systems and clubs and things like that, you had to play dynamically just to hear things. Sometimes the piano wouldn't even be mic'd, and you definitely had to cool out if you wanted to hear what the piano player is playing.
I just feel like I really want you to tell me the first time that you met Phil Upchurch.
Oh boy!
I mean, was it on were you going to Market Street? Did you see the Blind Dobro players? I'm just trying to get an idea of like the gigs because Phil was such a monster and
yeah,
and
still is.
Well, yeah, I mean, we did 2 epic interviews and he was just talking about, he's like, if I could do it, I just transcribed this thing and put it up on Facebook, but he just said, he goes, I don't have any regrets, but given the chance to do it all over again, he goes, I would have been a little more single-minded and I was so driven to be an accompanist. He goes, I would have taken the George Benson approach when Miles approached him to join his band, and Benson was like, no, I want to do my own thing. And the idea there is like, you're on this album, Love and Feeling from '73. Things were plugged in at that point. Of course, it had, it wasn't like, it was early. I hate labels, but it was, the early stages of electronic confusion rock kind of stuff. But where were the steady gigs that you were able to play? 6 nights a week, burlesque houses, places where you were able to really cultivate your own individual sound.
Well, a gig that I had for many years, I was the house drummer at Mr. Kelly's in Chicago with Larry Novak Trio, and those are formidable years for me. I joined Larry. I think I was maybe 23, 24 years old at that time, and he was looking for a drummer, and I was down at the University of Iowa. I had gone there to actually play with a group. Dale Ayler, who's a wonderful producer and arranger and a piano player, was doing his graduate work there, and I was living in Chicago. And he said, get your butt down to school here. I found this great bass player. So I went down there and we did some playing. And so I enrolled for a semester at the University of Iowa. And while I was there, a mutual friend of ours in Chicago called me and he said, Larry Novak's looking for a drummer. Vernell Fournier had been with him and had moved to New York.
Vernell Fournier had been with him before you took the drum chair?
Yeah.
Oh, my God, that's insane.
Yeah, it was a great trio.
That's
insane. Well, Larry Novak is, I don't know if do you know.
I need to get, I got to get, is he still with us, dude? Is he still around?
Yeah, yes, he is.
All right, well, anyway, we'll get to that. I need to get to that, Cat. But so you're putting this around, like, what, 61? What year is this?
60, I think we're talking 64.
Okay, so 64, you're at Iowa, and they're like, Novak needs a drummer.
No, so, yeah, and so we were, Dale and myself and John Ruma, who was the bass player I'm talking about in Iowa, we were going to the Notre Dame Jazz Festival with the trio, and then we had a week off. So I said to Larry, I said, well, I'm going to go play the festival. We're going to Notre Dame to do the festival, and I can come up to Chicago and play the week with you. He said, that's great. So we played the Jazz Festival, and we were a runner-up. I'm trying to think of who won. Sextet, I think, beat us and stuff. But anyway,
yeah, well, no, I mean, like Bob. That was like Bob James's group was there. I think that might have been.
It's actually Bob James is who beat us.
Bob James had the most ferocious thing, and his trio was insane. But he told me that story. Yeah. I'll send you that interview because he told me the same story. He blew them. Quincy Jones, I think, was a judge. Maybe Oliver Nelson. I don't even.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. They were, and
unbelievable.
They made us the runner-up because it was a hell of a trio. I mean, Dale was just a killer piano player.
Jesus.
And
do you have any tapes of that? You have tapes of that stuff?
Dale and I had a conversation just about 3 weeks ago that we were just reliving some of this stuff, talking.
I'm going to talk to Dale about. We got to release some of those. I got to hear some of because James. There was an issue on Verve. I mean, it was a. They issued that trio. I would love to hear what you were doing because the drummer for Bob James at the time was playing oil drums and all sorts of craziness. But anyway, if you're sitting on tapes, now's the time to get them out.
We did record that trio, but I don't know if that stuff exists at all anywhere. Maybe Dale has something. He might have some stuff of it. But anyway, I drove up to Chicago. And here's Mr. Kelly's. This was an iconic club. I don't know if you know about this club at all, but all the stars of today were all opening acts in those days. Bette Midler, Barbra Streisand. I would go to work and play for Sarah Vaughan, Carmen McRae, Mel Torme. It was an unbelievable gig. And I'd pull up in front of this place, and I'd stuck my nose on the window many times, knowing what an iconic place this was, and I'm loading my drums in, and Mater D at that time, who turned out to be this great guy, said, "What the hell you want?" And I said, "Well, I'm here to play with Larry." And he goes, "Oh." There were a set of drums on the stage.
Yeah.
And I packed them up, and I set up mine. I said, "This is my gig. I'm staying." And so we played that night. We played the first set, and Larry hired me after the first set, and I was there almost 8 years. We were there.
Unbelievable. At Mr. Kelly's and
Mr.
who?
Kelly, yeah.
So it was. Who was the bass player?
Well, at that time it was Jim Atkins, who was a wonderful bass player from Chicago. Passed passed on a few years back. A dear guy and a beautifully melodic player, a great time. And
were you guys like getting? Were you guys doing Novak? Were you able to record it all as a trio?
Yes, we did.
Wow.
We recorded. Larry did a record with Vernell actually before I was in the trio. He did a record for Mercury Records, I think, a trio thing. And then Larry and I, we later on, many years later, we started working on some stuff, and we recorded a trio record. And then Larry recorded the last thing he's done. He recorded a trio record. I'm not on it. I'm trying to think who's. Rusty Jones is playing drums.
Rusty Jones. No, I'm looking here. Larry Novak Plays from '64. That was.
Yeah, that's the one with Vernell.
It looks like Vernell. There's Les Hooper, the aforementioned Les Hooper that you talked about. He's a composer on that. But Jim Atlas on bass.
No, you're talking about that's not Larry Novak Plays. That's Les Hooper wouldn't have. He didn't do any writing for that, I don't think.
I'm just you know what it is. I think it might have been some. See, he did a lot of cover tunes on. He did a Beatles tune, "The Fool on the Hill," "Church Key," but this is. This is. I'm sorry. This is Joe Morello, "Another Step Forward." All right, so that's from '70. Oh. Okay, so that's '71. I'm looking back here. So that was with Vernell, but that trio that you were in, actually never got recorded.
Not that trio, no. Not as a trio.
Okay, I just want to be clear about this too. Also, Vernell hit the drum chair, and also a guy named Curtis Prince.
Yes.
And then the bass player is a guy I've interviewed who I absolutely love, is Cleveland Eaton.
Absolutely, yeah.
In
fact, Cleveland, when Larry had Cleveland and Vernell at the same time.
Oh my gosh!
And then when Larry called me to come in, I thought Cleve might still be the bass player, but then Jim had already joined Larry. So I think Cleveland had gone off to work with Basie, I think.
Cleve is the. I had a great hang with Cleve, man. I mean, this was like this. Were you channeling at that time the conversational Bill Evans stuff, or were you even stretching out? How would you describe the music you were playing? Was it really a deep conversation?
Yes, it was. Larry and Bill were very good friends, and although their styles were, light years difference in many ways, Larry had that same sensibility of openness and conversational trio playing. And trio playing has always been my favorite venue. I love piano bass drums. There's a openness to it and a conversational openness to it that's always been exciting. I mean, it's always fun when you add a couple of great horn players, but that center rhythm section feeling is a very special place, And for a drummer, it would just open me up, and I could play, all sorts of dynamic levels and looseness of time, which has always been very intriguing to me, the venue of the trio has always been a great place, and Novak was just a great player to play music with.
Can you go further about your concept of this looseness of time, not especially as it relates to the raising the collective consciousness of the group, and then the audience, and then going back to the group? Well,
I don't know. It's hard to articulate.
I know it is.
The sense of playing, but I guess I look at it maybe in a sense of playing rhythmly and texture together. How those dynamics kind of push at each other. You can there especially when related to drums. There's drum soloing where it's very chop oriented, and guys can do just some amazing things with their coordination between their hands and feet that just make out remarkable stuff. And then there are ways of doing it sometimes where, a silence between something has an intensity. And I've always kind of liked the idea of pushing the, especially in soloing, pushing the kind of the sound of rhythm and texture happening at the same moment.
Exactly.
So the dynamic changes pretty quickly. And I've never been a great chop player. I don't have that kind of solo chops. And like I said, I like texture. I like kind of bending the drums to do that at the time. And and I'm not adverse to play. I mean, I like volume. I think it can be very an intense moment, and then dropping it down pretty quickly to other things. And I think you see the epitome of that in great players like Tony Williams and Jack DeJohnette, the guys who took the drums, Max Roach. I mean, who took the drums and made them melodic entity,
absolutely
under themselves, and they're absolutely those guys are the epitome of to me of great drumming, and that's always been my
Did you get a chance to see? Did you get a chance to see DeJohnette play in Chicago?
Not only did I get a chance to see Jack,
yeah,
he and I we're I think we're contemporaries in age and stuff. And I had a trio gig on Sundays at a place called the Old East Inn on 65th and.
What was it called? What was it called?
The Old East Inn.
The Old East Inn.
And it was on 65th and Cottage Grove in Chicago.
Oh, this is great.
And I had this Sunday kind of jam. I don't know how I ended up with it, but I had the rhythm section, and I think Ronnie Ellison was the piano player. John Allen was the bass player, myself, and then horns and players would come in, stuff like that. And Jack would come in, and first he'd play piano, and he'd sound great, and then he'd go over and he'd sit at the drums, and shit.
I cannot, because he's a great piano player too.
Oh yeah, absolutely, and he sounded great playing piano, and then he'd play drums, and it was just wonderful. And
did you guys play? Did you guys play double drums together though? You must have played double drums.
No. There was just one set. The only I saw him do that later. He was out with Coltrane. After Alvin left Coltrane, for a while, Coltrane had two drummers, and Jack was one of them. And I forget who.
It was like Rashid Ali. Rashid Ali, maybe.
It might have been. Yeah.
You know what I was going to say? This is because I've been on this trip, Radtke, for 6. This will be I'm going into my 7th year on the Jake Feinberg Show, and DeJohnette and I caught a hang in 2012, and he told this incredible story about being essentially your age. Train showed up with I guess it was with McCoy and I think it might have been Jimmy Garrison or Paul Chambers, one of the cats, and they played. I forget the club they were at. But Jack wasn't officially in the band, but after the second set, I think Alvin disappeared. He got arrested or something happened. He got taken. He didn't show up for the third set, and so. And I'll send you this. This is one of the defining audio clips of my entire career. Was DeJohnette telling this story about someone's like, "Yeah, this kid can really play. Let him play." And so he goes up to the bandstand, and Coltrane didn't say anything to him. He didn't He didn't say, "Come on up," or no. He just nodded at him, and DeJohnette got up on the stand and started to swing. And he just said the thing about Coltrane is that the spirit in the room. Every set would get higher and higher and higher and higher to the point where people were literally, it was like holy rollers falling out of their chairs screaming.
Was this a Chicago club this happened?
Absolutely.
I wonder.
Yeah, I'm going to send you.
Probably was. I bet it was the Plug Nickel.
You're 100%. It was what exactly? It was one of these major defining clubs. It was just like the late show. Elvin went off somewhere. Who knows where he went? And they're like, yo, let this kid play. But then, so you're telling me that, yeah, because that's what he said. He goes, I played with Coltrane before I actually joined Coltrane, which is what you're talking about. He eventually did join him.
Yeah.
So Jack would come show up at the at this lounge, this gig that he played piano. Who was in the, and then this guy Ronnie Elliston comes back in. I just wanted to go back to this Dick Schory album from Carnegie Hall.
Ronnie's on that.
Gary Burton, Paul Horn, and Joe Morello were on it as well.
Yes, yeah. They were guests. They were guests, all soloists and artists that night. You know.
And my man, the guy I just interviewed, my man Steve Swallow, played bass on Sunset Bell. I mean, this was just mind blowing. I mean, the point is that Schory had a lot of street cred with a lot of cats.
Yeah. He was a very interesting guy. You know, it was very dedicated music guy, and he took some heat about the fact that it was a lot of drummers and percussion stuff like that, but the idea worked. You know, and like I said, he utilized good writers like some people like Les Hooper who were great arrangers, and made it a very interesting stuff. You know, that was fun.
Did what was essentially the first time that, you know, there were so many studios in Chicago, but what was the first record date that you actually played on? Wow, the first record date. Wow. I mean, because I know the All Music Guide is not accurate on this. They're the first recording they say is 1970 at Carnegie Hall. So I know it was before that. Oh yeah, you mean for me recording? Yeah, man. Yeah, this is what I'm trying to stretch the lineage out. You know, I mean, your recording career started before 1970. Yeah, it started. Basically, it started around 1965, 66. I started. What that happened when you had a steady gig in Chicago. The union had a rule that you could not take a casual date, and that included commercials, studio. Studio dates. Those were considered casual. Wow. And that was a casual. You were getting paid for that. You were getting paid. Here's the thinking behind this was years ago, when Petrillo ran the music union. He thought television was a silly fad, and he didn't negotiate any kind of television and radio contracts for musicians like SAG and AFTRA did, or some of the other unions. And he thought that the future of the musician was in the radio station musician. And so the guys that were doing commercials knew they had a good thing going, so they got the union to make a rule that if a steady player had a 5-day-a-week gig, he wasn't allowed to do another casual date on the side, including the daytime stuff, which was all the commercials that were absolute jingles and I dig that. Yeah, and I sort of understand that. All the heavy guys at that point supposedly were in the studio, like WGN, and I believe maybe NBC or ABC had a house band. So they were like house musicians. And when I was at Mr. Kelly's, I came under that rule, so I couldn't do studio work. And then they lifted it about the second or third year I was at Kelly's, and all of a sudden I started to get studio work all day long, you know. So I was recording then, but it was, commercials, television, radio commercials at that point. I'm not sure what records I might have popped up on at that time. There were a few. I want you to think very close. I need to know the leaders of these. You must have some memories of the cats you played with, at least a couple of the albums. Maybe you never got credit on the back of the record. Well, yeah, there were records I did for Chester that never get credit on. That's because they never filed contracts for anybody. Now which records were those? I did stuff for Charles Stephanie for them. So it was the Dells. I played on a couple of. Are you kidding? Dells. You were playing with oh my God, with the Dells? Yeah, it was very cool. And I remember getting. I remember when
picked up the album when it came out, and there was no credits on that stuff, and that was kind of typical, those rhythm sections that time. There was Phil Upchurch was on all that stuff. Lou Satterfield was playing bass on most of that stuff. Kind of think of some of the.
I know. My man Monk Higgins was playing on that. I bet.
Yeah, and Steph was the arranger and producer on a lot of those things, and he's just a sweetheart of a guy, and he for some reason he liked my stuff, and so, I was getting plied in with some really great R&B musicians, and it was fun, the learning curve was serious at that point for me, but it was really fun, but I'm not sure what albums that I could. I probably got them in my collection.
Well, no, what I'm looking at here, I'm looking at two albums from '68 that Stepney arranged. One was called "There Is," and then there's another one called. There's a Rotary Connection album called "Peace." I'm not sure if you were on that, but
I would have. If anybody, that would have been Donnie Simmons playing there.
But I mean, the Dells in '68. There Is.
There is maybe. I'm not sure. Is there another record?
Yeah, I'm just.
A little later.
A little bit. Just self-titled "The Dells" on '69, and then in 1970, "Oh What a Night," and then 1970 again, "Like It Is, Like It Was," and then 1971, "Freedom Means." And then 1972, sweet as funk can be.
Is Steph the producer on all those records?
Every one.
Wow.
Producer, arranger, conductor, composer. So but what's interesting is that this is more of a soul R&B bag. What about a jazz? What about a Stone jazz record for Radtke prior to Schory?
Wow.
Even though Schory wasn't exactly traditional straight ahead jazz, but it was.
Yeah. I don't think I have any discography from Stone jazz kind of stuff that was released, or there were always things guys were doing. They would put things together and record it, stuff like that. But it wasn't really. It was more demo kind of stuff than reality. So. I don't know. I did some. I remember there was a wonderful trumpet player out of Chicago named Bucky Milam, and Bucky did some interesting stuff.
Bucky. How do you spell the last name on that cat?
Milam. Bucky was his first name. Bucky.
Unbelievable.
He was a wonderful artist as well, as a matter of fact, and his trumpet playing, he did some really interesting stuff. He was one of those guys out of the North Texas State world, that whole community of guys that came from Denton, Texas, and where there was a bunch of great players came from that college, the University of Texas.
One thing I wanted to, this is fantastic. I mean, because we're going to need for set 2, we're going to need you to dive into your record collection to find which albums you were on, so we can stretch this thing out. But how did you learn to play tablas? When were you exposed to Indian music?
It was music that I heard. One time I couldn't get over the drum sound. And started buying Indian music. Just to, I really enjoyed the blowing, and I found that I really gravitated towards South Indian musicians. And
That's
someone
really
explained to me
interesting.
one time, and I don't know if it's true or not, but someone told me, that the northern musicians were a little more staid and classical, and it was almost more religious, and the southern guys were kind of like the beboppers. They were.
Wait a minute. Where was Ala Raka from? Were they the north or the?
I think he was a southern.
So
player,
they were more I definitely think that those cats were the bebop. There's no doubt they were more open-minded. I mean, they were unbelievable.
Some of the people who really know the music are probably going to hit you over the head with a brick, but I'm only relating this.
No, I dig it, man. I dig it so much. But so you just were getting, but the polyrhythm stuff you were hearing on records. Did you get a chance to see Ravi and Aluraka live? Did you get a chance to see some of that stuff?
No. I never saw Aluraka play live. Actually, what did I see? There's a stringed instrument. Is it called a vina?
Yeah.
Vina. And I think I saw a concert with or a club set or something with that group. And I think they were like the Southern kind of guys. I'm not sure, but that's the only one I ever saw live. But it was just kind of listening, and I bought a set of tablas and just sort of tried to emulate the sounds I was hearing. I was not schooled in it, didn't study with anybody, and I probably should have, but I just was having fun, and it was kind of fun to own the drums because they're beautiful drums.
Oh well, I mean, Radtke, like, let's be clear, man. I mean, the truth is that, the reason that all you guys have your own individual sound is because you learned on your own. You were always self-taught. I mean, you might have had a teacher here and there, or played in a big band here and there, but it wasn't like you were not part of, as Steve Swallow would say, the academy. You didn't come out of, you didn't. The musical vocabulary cannot grow in academia. Do you agree with that statement or not?
I don't know. I do really see that sort of divisional line in how it relates personally to me, because I did not do the college music scene. I was a street taught musician. I played as a kid. I grew up. My father's a musician. I grew up around music. When I was in high school, I was already gigging pretty much. I was doing a lot of gigs on weekends, playing with some of the jobbing bands like Ralph Martiri Band and Les Elgart Brother Band, and I was kind of like already hobnobbing with older guys, so I was learning. I was getting educated that way, and at one point I was thinking about going to Berkeley, and I made a call to them, and I said I was thinking about coming to school, and I said, but I have a problem. I said, I quit high school, and I only have a GED and he said great, we don't care, come, and I didn't do it. I probably that would have been a major change.
Well, I mean, what was it, like? Was 69 or something? What year was that?
No, that was like 61 or 62. I
didn't even know Berkeley was. I always just thought I did not know that Berkeley was operating. So like Ray Santee.
It was way back.
Wow.
It was way back there. Yeah, it was way back there. And it would have been a major change, and it would have probably been incredible. It would have started me on a whole different path. But the path I ended up, I got my education, and it was on the street. That's how I learned. And
isn't jazz a street music too?
It is a street music, but obviously now it's become so academic, and it's become so taught, and it's taken on its own. It has its own place in the academic world now. So it's. And
there's also this thing where it's like it used to be. I mean, it used to be dance music, and now we've been trained to go and just stare at somebody's facility and think and clap on cue after they're done with a solo. Yeah. It's mind numbing, and I'm not really sure if there's any other way to self-correct other than to ask cats like you, like, were you actually playing on the street at a certain point? I mean, were you like engaging the cats, like you were a street scholar?
Well, in a sense that when you go from club to club, and in your youth, and you're playing gigs, little gigs and little joints set up and play. It is a street kind of thing. It's sort of guerrilla music. You're out, you go and you set up, and you attack and you play, and then you split and you wait for the next gig to come along like that. And that was kind of how I got started. And then as your reputation builds a little bit, you get called. More and more guys invite you to play, and I guess that's that's the form of the education, and that's how what I consider street playing. In the sense of it's you're on the street. You're basically out there banging away, and
right, hoping
that someone's going to hear you, and it happens. Your reputation kind of builds from that. And I'm sure that's must be very true today for young players, just like it is for my generation. And it's just.
I just think anybody. I think anybody that any of the pioneers of the music, unsung or major names, were always searching for new ground. It wasn't like you showed up at the academy and said, "Okay, this is jazz, and you're going to learn everything there is to know about this music, and then you're going to do it." It was never like that. It was this. I mean, like Ornette Coleman. Like when you were with Novak, you guys probably played a little bit free once. Probably got pretty free.
Sometimes, yeah.
That's why we need those tapes.
Later,
That's why we need those tapes.
Later at night, we would stretch, quite a bit. But it was, when the club wasn't full, and because it was a fairly, it was a show club. It had its roots. They owned the other clubs they owned. They had to meet him, and they owned the London House. And the London House was a pure jazz room. That was a very cool restaurant that had a lot of great music all the time. And that had a house trio, Eddie Higgins, and then Larry had the house gig at Kelly's, and then, of course, we would play for acts. We would get to play for all these great players and singers and stuff like that.
Did cats like? Did you have like major horn players like Sonny Stitt or who would come in and play with you guys in that Novak trio in the '60s?
Well, in those days, the format of the club was that if there was a star comedian act who was like
like a Red Fox or things like
they would be the headliner, and then there would be a singing opening act, and quite often they were young people that were coming up, and some really good ones. Streisand was an opening act for Mort Slaw, as a matter of fact, and trying to think of Bette Midler was an opening act for someone. Who are some of the other majors?
So you'd be primarily backing up singers, but I just have to believe that some of the cats from New York would come through, and you'd want.
Well, not too many horn players and stuff like that would come over because it wasn't really a room that encouraged.
I see. Yeah. Okay. I did.
If that would happen, that would happen at the London House. In fact, we would go over to the London House when we were done, or if we had an hour or something like that, and we would sit in. I would go in, and Cannonball Adderley would invite me to sit in quite a few times when Cannon was there. And
with Zawinul?
Joe was playing.
Unbelievable. And Nat and Booker and Walter Booker and those cats. I'm
trying to think. Maybe Sam Jones.
Sam Jones, unbelievable, dude. It was like Lewis Hayes was on drums, maybe, and they let you.
No, it was later. It was
McCurdy.
Roy McCurdy, yeah.
This is just mind blowing. The whole thing, the whole generosity of spirit, the ability to sit in, the lack of territory. I know it wasn't perfect, but it seemed to me that there was this insane sort of overlap, and people were not overly sort of stuck up about, I don't know. Some people would get really uptight about, especially when Freddie Hubbard or people like that would start venturing into more electric bass. Maybe, they say, oh, you're not playing the real stuff. You're not playing bebop. But I just like cats like Cannon, Bird, Miles, Dizzy. To me, they were always open to all kinds of music. It seems to me like
absolutely.
And that's helped the music grow.
Miles was, talk about the leader of being open and changing his stripes, and just, you know, he would turn around and redo that. I don't know if a friend of mine, Fred Simon, I always credit him with this quote, and I don't know if he said it or if someone said it to him, but someone was bemusing about when Miles was in that period where he was kind of playing pop rock tunes towards the end of his career. I think his nephew was programming for him, and they're doing a thing, and they were doing, you know, it was not the highlight of his electric stuff, you know.
No.
And someone was you know, moaning about it, and Fred said, "Excuse me," he said, "here's the man who's changed the face of jazz 3 or 4 times. I think we can cut him a little slack."
Yeah, no, I'm friends with Fred on Facebook, the adjunct professor of jazz at Roosevelt University, and Fred at Fred Simon Music, lives in Chicago. Yeah, I mean, you know, it's like, you know, did you play with the late great Richard Evans at all?
I did in the studios. Yeah.
Can you talk about his legacy to music? I mean, that dude was a ferocious player and an incredible arranger as well.
Yeah, he was a dear, sweet guy. I don't know what else to say about him. He was jovial. He was like absolutely up all the time, and he played that way. You know, he was very inviting as a especially within the rhythm section. You know, there's an openness that goes on between rhythm sections that connect, and you know, he was that type of player. You know, he just opened things up, and I don't know what else to say about you know, other than just, you know, it was this great, nice experience.
You know, I just wasn't sure if you ever had a chance to, because he did all that stuff with the Soulful Strings. I wasn't sure if you were ever involved with any of that stuff.
Well, I played on bass with him and at Universal, I know, in Chicago. You know, and I'm not exactly, I don't remember, you know, exactly what the function was of the sessions. You know, it might have been some of the Soulful String stuff. It might have been, you know, it might have been too, where we were playing for somebody else, you know, but I seemed like Richard was a writer on a lot of that stuff, you know, so.
Yeah. You know, when you first came out, I know I must have seen you on that Schory Carnegie Hall album, but the most recent Radtke sighting for me was this aggressive, progressive psychedelic jazz rock album with Ron Steele, and on Ovation Records,
right.
And Bobby Christian. Bobby Christian was another cat. Is he still around or no?
No, Bobby passed. In fact, Bobby, Ron Steele is married to Bobby's daughter.
Oh, it's all 6 degrees of separation now.
Yeah, plus, you know, Ovation Records, I think, was Schory record label.
Dude, Ovation Records, you know, and Dick Schory was so dedicated to the music that he started an offshoot of Ovation Records on the West Coast called Black Jazz Records with Gene Russell, and he put all these unsung cats like Rudolph Johnson and Chester Thompson and Henry the Skipper Franklin, Calvin Keyes, all these guys that I've interviewed. They were all on the Black Jazz label, and you'd see it was Black Jazz, and then underneath Ovation Records with all the hands clasped together with that trademark signature. Unbelievable. Schory's legacy was insane. But tell me about Ronnie Steele. You're telling me this guy was a Nashville picker as well as a jazzer in Chicago?
No, he started out, he was in Nashville, and he was a recording engineer. And he was working for RCA Records, he told me. And RCA had a studio in Nashville, a fairly famous one, you know, with a room. In fact, he was an engineer for Presley on a couple things, and
Johnny Cash,
you know, he's got quite
unbelievable.
I don't, you know, well, you know, I called Ronnie yesterday, you know, and
yeah, you let him know that this freak is on his team.
I said, you know, you had brought up this project that Ronnie had done, and I said, I think he would like to talk to you. I said, do you mind if I give him your number? Because, I didn't want to blurt it out. He said, no, absolutely. Have him call me anytime. So before we're done,
absolutely. But when did you first connect with Ronnie originally?
First time I probably met Ronnie, I'm sure it was probably a recording session. It might have been for somebody like Dick Marks Productions. He was a big producer in Chicago commercials, and Ronnie played almost exclusively for him. It was in his kind of main rhythm section, and then I remember there was a period in the '60s when Mr. Kelly's, the block that Mr. Kelly's was on, had a fire, and eventually Kelly's got damaged from all the water and stuff, so they shut down. And the show that we were doing at that time was Lenny Kazan was the headliner.
Oh wow!
And
Lenny Kazan, yeah.
Lenny Kazan.
Yeah.
She was, she's turned into a movie actress and a singer.
Sure.
She was great. Great. But what are you doing for the next month? And I said, well, right now, nothing. I'm out of a gig. And she said, well, come to New York with me. So I said, okay. So I went to New York to play at the Plaza with her, and we were there for a whole month. And then I started doing some other gigs with her on and off. And eventually Kelly's was reopening, and so they wanted to reopen with the show that closed it. As though like the comma, will start again. So Laney was going to go back, and she said, I want to do this. They want to do this radio broadcast remote from Kelly's for some New York station. She said, but I need strings and a couple other things. Can you get them? And I said, sure. Why not? So when I came back to Chicago, I said to Larry, she wants to do strings and rhythms, augment the rhythm section and stuff like that. And he said, yeah, we'll do this. And Ronnie was the guitar player on that. I think maybe that's the first time we met. And and he had already had this fairly intense, pretty studio reputation going, and so I think that was our first meeting musically.
Wow.
I'm a little vague on that. I'm sorry.
Well, I mean, it never got pressed onto record. It was just like a radio broadcast.
No, yeah, it was a remote. They did like a live.
I mean, those things were legendary back in the day. I mean, you'd be running the stuff out of a truck in the back of the club.
Yeah.
I mean, it's unbelievable. So I mean, but Steele had chops. He could play. I mean, this record is so bizarrely on fire, and it's not jazz. It's just like he could play so many different instruments.
Yeah, he played a bunch of different stuff on there, didn't he? Like a zithar and all.
Dude, I mean, it's beyond. There's like 12 different string instruments that he's playing, and the only other musician is Tom Radtke. I'm like, this is insane.
I think I overdubbed on. Well, I was trying after we talked about that. I was trying to remember if we did basics. We probably did some basics too. Because.
Do you have a copy of? Do you have a copy of that record? Because I'll send you my copy immediately. This thing is on.
I do. Well, I have a wall collection of LPs, that I'm sure sitting in there somewhere. I think I got my first record in there. So, I still have a large collection of vinyl. So I know it's in there somewhere.
Well, I mean, it's for. I mean, I was just hoping beyond hope that there was no overdubbing. That you guys were in it in the studio together, just guitar and drums. It was just beyond fire.
Well, probably the basics had to be that way, and so and then of course Ronnie was adding things, so obviously he was overdubbing a lot of other stuff, And I'm trying to think, was there no bass player is credited? Is he playing bass and everything too?
Everything.
Oh, wow.
So I mean, after the Kaizen, the gig, did you guys wind up playing in an outfit together around Chicago? And would it be considered jazz, or did he play with Novak and you guys?
No. I would only see Ronnie on dates, on sessions. We never worked in a club or anything together. That time with Lady, I think, was the only experience I'd had with him on a live thing. He was a wonderfully competent player. Just and that obviously that book that was not anything that demanded any screaming guitar solos and stuff. Lainey was a performer. With her stuff was very Streisand-ish. In fact, she understudied for Streisand for Funny Girl. That's how her.
Wow, I don't think I knew that.
Yeah, in fact, she performed. I guess Barbara ended up sick one night or two nights, and Lainey took over, as the understudy, and she got rave reviews, and then Barbara had her fired.
Yeah, that was it. That was it for her.
Because I don't know if she got because of the great reviews, or who knows, or Lainey was ready to do something anyway, And she ended up taking Barbara as the accompanist, the pianist, as her pianist. Later they became married. They were married folks. So
did you I was just wondering if you could just before we wrap set one, just talk a little bit about a contemporary of yours, George Marsh, was in that area. I know he played for Streisand at the University of Champaign-Urbana. He had those kinds of cosmic gigs as well, where he just to get his feet wet, and he was doing some stuff with Cadet, with Clemmer in '68. But George is a dear friend of mine, and I had a feeling you guys.
Our paths crossed. One connection was Ronnie Ellison, the piano player, because Ronnie came from downstate Illinois, and I think George was from that area originally.
You're 100% right. Yep, 100%.
I know he was at Champaign-Urbana. It was at school. In fact, at that time, it was kind of there was a kind of something in the water there, because it was Ronnie Ellison there, George Marsh, Ron DeWar, this remarkable tenor player, came out of there at the same time. There was there was a trumpet player, I think a flugelhorn player, a trumpet player, and a writer, Jamie Knapp. He was also in that group.
Wow.
And like I said, there's something in the water going on down there, because these guys were, when they came up to the city, they were playing some new shit. It was, excuse my language.
It's all right. No, it's fine. What was it? What was new about it?
It was just, they were very free, had a very fresh attitude about harmonic stuff. It wasn't like free jazz, just absolutely blow your brains out. No, they were structured.
Yeah, right.
And Jamie Knapp wrote a couple of beautiful songs, and then they'd write songs that were humorous. I remember Knapp wrote this one blues line, and the name of the song was "Hold My Swiss Cheese Sandwich, I've Just Had a Hot Flash." and then another one was "Don't Touch That Groundhog, Mabel, You Don't Know Where It's Been." So they were bizarre tales, but they were interesting music.
Was it pre-Beatles, or was this after the Beatles?
This is, I guess now the Beatles were. No, I think this is pre-Beatles. I don't think they were wall-to-wall music on the radio yet. Those guys, were still bubbling under in England.
And it was and the Knapp and the Marsh, that stuff was all instrumental. There was no vocals or anything on it.
Nothing. No, it was all instrumental stuff that they were doing. And like I said, they were obviously all students together at the same time. And I don't have a real history because I wasn't down there and stuff. But I sort of got it. I got the story secondhand. Especially from Ronnie and stuff like that. And then later, George moved to the West Coast, right? I mean, he's in the San Francisco area, right?
Absolutely. Well, he started doing incredibly, probably around '67. Cats like Mike Clark, who were playing with eventually played with Herbie, but he was playing just jazz in Oakland. He'd go to Pierce Street Annex and see Denny Zeitlin with George playing
Yeah.
It wasn't jazz. It was just rock. It was really different stuff. You know, it was really different.
Yeah.
You know, yeah, he did move out there, but he cut his teeth in Chicago, and he became very close with Lonnie Liston Smith's brother. I think was a drummer. I can't. I just wanted to ask you before we wrap set one here, Radtke. Did you ever play a gig, organ, Hammond B3, and drums?
No, never did. You know who often wanted to do that was Judy Roberts. She said, we got to form an organ trio. I said, anytime, Judy, let me know. But we never did it. But
who was the cat that impressed you as far as their ability to kick pedals in Chicago? You know, a lot of people think that most B3 players are not playing bass lines, but was there one that impressed you?
Well, I remember seeing who did I see at Plug Nickel?
Charlie Erlin or something?
No, and it wasn't Jimmy Smith.
Groove Holmes?
Not Groove Holmes either. I remember a young guy, and he played pedal, and he was amazing how he played the screw.
Not Jimmy Smith.
Not Jimmy Smith. No. Did Jimmy play pedal? I don't know if he.
Jimmy did. No, I just talked to Paul Hornsby, who is one of the studio sharks at Capricorn Records in Macon, and he said he went out. He and Greg Allman were in the Hourglass together, which preceded the Allman Brothers, and they were playing like Farfisa organs and these things. And then all of a sudden he went out there to Whiskey A Go Go with the band, and they sat down one night and saw Jimmy Smith, just him and a drummer, and Jimmy was playing the percut. He was kicking the pedals. It was mind blowing. You know. But you know, maybe was it a black cat or a white cat that you're trying to think?
Yeah, no, it was African American guy.
It was Johnny Hammond Smith, maybe.
Yeah,
maybe.
And it's one of those names.
Yeah.
Sorry,
yeah, you know, it's
getting old.
No, you know, I mean, Radtke, you're on fire, man. I mean, if you can we pick up part two maybe next week? I would just love to I'd love to continue the conversation.
Sure.
Yeah.
I'm you know, if I'm not meandering on too much for you, you know.
Dude, I think we're just really just getting. I mean, listen, man. I mean, you know, we're just getting started, man. You know. Yeah. So I mean, and in the meantime, in between now and then, if you have a chance, just let's try to lock down some of the gigs, the records you have from the gigs you were on pre-1970, so we can start building this lineage back up again. I certainly want to go find those. I'm gonna go buy a copy of that Dick Schory. I mean, the record store here has 50 copies of Dick Schory records, but I'm just
really?
Tons. I mean, I see more Dick Schory records in thrift stores than I've ever seen in my life. I mean, it's insane. You know, and there's something to be said for this idea of collective percussion, where not everybody's wanking it, but they're all playing these parts. It's separate parts, but when you fit them together, it works like traditional African rhythms, you know? Like these pulsating, like that pulse, which is what jazz needs. It needs conversation and it needs pulse. Music needs that. Otherwise, you know, there's a real threat to melodic improvisation on the horizon if that goes away. So I just think it's important to continue that. And, you know, so I'll give you a call in a minute off air, and I'll get some numbers for Novak and Steele and those cats too. But it was so great to connect with you, Radtke.
Okay. Well, yeah, I can give you that stuff.
All right. Yeah. We'll set a date for part two, man. Much thanks for being part of the program.
All right, Jake. Well, it's fun talking to you. Thanks very much.
All right, man. Be good. Peace. Tom Radtke, unheralded drummer, and we just tip of the iceberg with him. We'll be back tomorrow, regularly scheduled program.